Welcome back to the Sustainability Imperative, and thanks so much for joining us for Track 4, Leadership in Action. Here, leaders from across the public and private sectors will give us a sense for what's on their dashboard when it comes to sustainability. What are they hopeful about? What keeps them up at night? But before we get underway, another friendly reminder to tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag #TheHillSustainability. We're broadcasting live and we'll be taking your questions. If you experience any trouble with the live stream, just refresh and hopefully it will all work out. Joining me now is Finucane, the Vice Chairman of Bank of America. Anne leads the company's strategic positioning, its ESG work, its sustainable finance efforts, and plenty more. And I also want to just say, because I want our audience to know who Anne Finucane is. She's regularly been named to Forbes and Fortune's most powerful women list, American Banker's 25 most powerful women in banking, named Barron's 100 most powerful women, etc. You are in the middle of banking and financing and moving action. And one of the things we've been talking about in the last 2 days, and we have another full day to go, is the transition that I think we've made between fig leaf action that companies have taken to substantial change. So, approaching the system. And I would love to hear what you think that transition is and what Bank of America under your leadership has been doing on this front.
Well, thanks for having me, Steve. Well, first, let's talk about ESG broadly. That was certainly more philanthropic years ago, but honestly, as companies have applied the tenets of ESG to their own operations, we have definitive research and proof that those that apply ESG, and I'm speaking of it broadly right now, are less volatile. Their earnings are more predictable. They have lower attrition amongst both customers and their employees. They have higher satisfaction for both employees and for their clients and customers. So these are all accrue to the benefit of ESG. And so that's really, I think, what was something we might have hoped for has turned out to be true. And you sort of think of ESG as in two buckets, at least I do: the environmental transition and then inclusive development. The S and the G are sort of the inclusive development part. And on the E part, that's actually become a productive and profitable business.
One of the things you've been working on is increasing your environmental business initiative to $1 trillion. I used to pay attention when I heard something was $1 billion. So $1 trillion is something you go, whoa. So tell us what that means.
Well, what it means is that we think we will do $1 trillion worth of business, climate financing, between now and the end of 2030. And we didn't come by this lightly. We had made a $300 billion commitment just 2 years ago, thinking that between these same 10 years that we would do $300 billion worth of climate financing. But in 2020, when we had a bad year by any account, we had done almost $60 billion, just north of $55 billion worth of climate financing. Energy efficiency projects, solar, wind, electric vehicle financing, etc. So very tangible financing. And we then revisited with all of our lines of business. We have 8 lines of business. We talked to capital markets, global banking, commercial banking, small business, consumer, etc., and just reviewed what their plans would be for the next 10 years. And those projections are going to be at least $1 trillion because the momentum is there. If 3 years ago, electric vehicle essentially was a synonym for Tesla, today you're listening and watching GM and Volkswagen and others change up their manufacturing floor. So we see big differences and big changes just in that short period of time. And so we recommitted to what we think is a very reasonable expectation over the next 10 years.
One of the things I've learned in this town over the couple of decades I've been here is that when the government goes in and makes big investments, like we may see in the Biden administration's infrastructure bill, you have jobs, you have, a climate orientation with some of this. And so they move. And then around that, you have lots of private sector partnerships, activities, businesses created and built. And I know that Bank of America is a key part of that ecosystem, financing a lot. And so you have insights into how legislation like the American Jobs Act or like infrastructure investment should be structured. Is it your sense, is there anything the administration should worry about in the way it's unfolding this? Are there ways to make it better and easier to work with greater positive impact, both on the economy, on jobs, on businesses, and on environmental sustainability?
Well, I think it will help if we have a single taxonomy. In other words, what's the dictionary? What does it mean? And right now, the European Union has a framework. They have legislation and they have a framework so that any company operating there understands what they consider to be green, their expectations of those companies, and the legislation and the regulation all match. It would help if the U.S. would do the same, and it would certainly help if it had some symmetry with the European Union, which I think it ultimately will be. I do think this will be a little like Basel, so the accounting rules will be a continuum, and that would be helpful. So that would be the big thing, I think. We've seen the Fed has joined other central banks on this greening of the financial system. We know that both Treasury and the SEC have now set up or are setting up departments on environment, on climate. And I think if we can work in tandem with them, that would be very good. I honestly think businesses have been ahead. You know, in the past 4 years where this wasn't a priority of the former administration, we and others had made a commitment to the Paris climate agreement in 2015, and we stayed the course. So we saw real momentum in those 4 years, despite the fact that the administration wasn't focused on that. And I think this has paid real dividends for us, because for us, we're seen as leaders in this climate financing. And this is real as companies try to become carbon neutral and then ultimately net zero. So I think if the language would be the same, the expectations would be predictable, it would be good for everybody.
You know, I'm fascinated by the space you're in, because you're clearly a business, but clearly see the bottom line as being one that benefits in part by ESG investing and, looking broadly at these other areas and bringing a lot of your customer base and clients and whatnot along with it. I interviewed the CEO of AT&T, John Stankey, the other day, and we talked a little bit about the political times we're in, a little bit about the toxicity we're in, talked the digital divide, the opportunity divide, and, after a year of pandemic, and whatnot. And we talked about how a company like AT&T, which is also huge, Bank of America is huge, how do you talk about two communities and deal with the fact that there's so much division in the country? Do you just ignore it and say, hey, we're going to go along this way? Or do you find, are there ways, Anne, of talking to parts of community that have not prioritized in their own minds or whatnot the importance of climate response and very other forms of sustainability? So I guess what I'm asking is, how do we talk with each other? You're such a leader in this. AT&T is a leader in this. John said, we go in and fix problems. We try and stay out of the big stuff, but go in and fix problems for people and fix them where they are. That was his answer. But what's yours?
I think it's hard to stay out of the big stuff. For us, we're in every community in America, or essentially are in every community. And we seek to be a positive force within that community. There are issues that come up, whether it's gun control or voting rights, and we have taken positions on those things. I mean, it would be more convenient if you could step aside, but it is hard to step aside. And when we think we have a responsibility to say something, we say something. I think on the environment, that is political than it has been in years past. And it really, I don't think was political in the last 4 years. I just don't think it was a priority. And when you look at the health issues or the extreme weather or drought or water shortage, these are real, and they're real in the US and they're real in Europe, and they're certainly real in the emerging markets. So that's where you can really, I think, do some real good. And when it comes to something like inclusive development, when you're thinking about better schools, better hospitals, capital to women, again, we can help there. We're a financial institution. We know how to do this kind of financial engineering. Sometimes it isn't profit making. Sometimes it requires a little bit of work that you're doing concessionary capital, or you're joining forces with other banks, with development banks, with nonprofits, with philanthropists to stand something up, and we've done that. Other times, it's something that it can be at least marginally profitable. So I think that it would be nice if we could step aside from everything political, but it's very difficult to do.
You know, and one of my favorite conversations and surprising ones that I had today was with Vicki Hollub. She happens to be the president and CEO of Occidental, an oil company, and they've committed to a pretty staggering array of investments, kind of a direct air carbon capture of a scale that we've never had before. Also promising, through most of the business to be net zero by 2040. I know Bank of America has committed to be net zero emissions by 2050. We were talking about the CEO of United Airlines that's made a similar kind of commitment, and talking about developments in biofuels and carbon sequestration. And so, in this arena, I guess it's the first time I see so many like yourselves, and I asked Vicki, is it easy to get there? Is that where gravity's taking us, or is it hard? And she said it's hard. We have to make really big decisions that are and we have to get a lot right to get there. I mean, is it easy or hard for Bank of America to meet its commitment, and what kinds of things do you need to put in place? Because you're so staggeringly large that I'm wondering how you're going to do it.
Well, it's even more complicated for banks. In order for us to become net zero, all of our clients have to be net zero, all of them. So at some point, you're going to have to choose not to do business with somebody. That'd be the worst case. More likely, and Vicki is a good example, that these companies, even the fossil fuel companies, are putting plans in place to get to net zero by whatever date. And it's very difficult to do. The first thing you do is to become carbon neutral yourself, which means you buy your energy on a renewable grid, you put solar up, you reduce your water usage, you just a number of things that you have to do. Generally, you don't get all the way there. So in the case of Bank of America, we get about 90% there, and we have a 10% delta. That is where you buy offsets, which are controversial. There are advocates that don't like offsets. They want you to get 100% there, but it's actually impossible to get there, or nearly impossible in the early years. You'll get there eventually. So I think that we need to put together plans for ourselves and for our clients, and find financing tools for them so they can make the transition. First to energy efficiency, and then to literally getting to carbon neutrality, and then finally to net zero. This is a process. It's pretty well gated. We need better research. We need better technology. I do hope that you asked earlier about the government and this administration. I think the more incentives they can give for research and technology, the better, because that's what we're going to need to get to where we need to be.
Let me just ask you finally, Anne, one of the areas, we happen to have known each other a few years, but the Bank of America has made some real commitments, is, diminishing inequality in America, creating opportunity across, racial divides in this country, LGBTQ rights and others. And there seems to be, you've been basically dealing within the empathy space, mutual concern and all of this. And I'm just wondering, as I sit in Washington, D.C. and see some of the things that have unfolded, what counsel do you have for this town on how, because you're down in North Carolina, how can we be smart and so I know this is out of left field, thing, but it's also about sustainability of, concern and civitas in this country. But I would love to give you a chance to sort of share with our policy community here what we can do better.
Well, for one thing, you have to listen to your own people, and you're not including just one group. To be inclusive of everybody, you have to listen to everyone, and you have to be fair. And to be fair means, by the way, for our company, we've made some, I think, bold moves from a social perspective, and we just reported our earnings today. They've never been better. So I think that it is hard work. It is an effort. You can't make everyone happy, but if you're transparent about how you made your decision and you try to be fair the entire time, that's important. And it isn't fair to have some be included and others excluded. We all need to be thinking about of eliminating poverty and eliminating exclusion and eliminating a sense of unfairness. So to create a level playing field, you have to do a lot of things that can be unpopular in the short term. But I would say from a business perspective, and remember, we are true capitalists at Bank of America. We have seen all of these things accrue to the benefit of our people and to our clients.
Well, Anne Finucane, Vice Chairman of Bank of America, really appreciate all the things you're doing in this space, and I hope you'll come back and give us some reports as things go down. Congratulations on your earnings today, but also congratulations on your investment in these important sustainability efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.